it was very intimidating because I was suddenly around some bass players, some of the best bass playing I had ever heard. I could not believe that some of these people were students. And most of them didn't remain students for long.
Welcome to another episode of Contrabass Conversations, your show covering life on the low end of the spectrum. I'm your host, Jason Heath. So glad to have you here today. And visit our site at contrabassconversations.com for all the details about what we're doing here. And I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message, feedback at contrabassconversations.com. Let me know a little bit about yourself. That would be great. And I know you're going to love today's episode with Eric Steffens. Eric is the principal bassist of the South Westphalian Orchestra, and he's also performed and subbed with many other leading German orchestras, including the West German Radio Orchestra, the Munich Philharmonic, Vienna Chamber Orchestra, Aachen Symphony Orchestra, and the Lübeck Philharmonic. He's toured, he's performed across 3 continents. Eric holds a bachelor's degree from Eastman, the Eastman School of Music, a postgraduate certificate from the University of Music and Performing Arts in Vienna, and a master's degree from the Cologne University of Music and Dance. What's super special for me is that Eric was one of my very first bass students ever. He started studying with me back in the early 2000s, and in fact, he was the first serious bass student I ever had. And it's been so much fun following along with his career over the past couple of decades. You're going to be hearing Eric playing Frescobaldi, Haydn, and David Anderson throughout the episode. And Eric's also going to be performing the Nino Rota Concerto with his orchestra, the South Westphalian Orchestra, on March 17th. I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsor, D'Addario Strings, and let you know about the new giveaway we're doing. D'Addario is going to be giving away a set of their orchestra strings, their pizzicato strings, and their hybrid strings. And you can enter that giveaway at contrabassconversations.com/strings. And I really enjoy using their pizzicato strings when I'm playing jazz style. They're bright strings. They're the brightest of all the helicore strings. They've got great growl and sustain. Francis Mooney uses them. Kieran Hanlon uses them. Missy Raines uses them. They're such excellent strings for pizzicato styles. And thank you to D'Addario for sponsoring the podcast. And thank you also to Rob Anzalotti of basscapos.com for providing hosting for Contrabass Conversations. And I interviewed Rob on the podcast. You can check that out at contrabassconversations.com/Rob Anzalotti. These extension capos are easy to install and adjust. They're cheaper and they're more reliable than hand-built latches, and they're light and quick to operate. Learn more at basscapos.com. All right, here we go with our conversation featuring Eric Steffens. Just let me know about your early, and this is kind of interesting doing with you because we've known each other for so long. So I kind of know some of this, but
you can. I can't pick anything up. You know everything.
No, I could probably fill in some gaps, but why don't you just let people know a little bit about your early musical years?
Sure. I guess, my first instrument was piano. I started that pretty young, I think 5 or 6, and nothing serious, just lessons on the side of school for fun, and then through in the public schools, I started with bass, 4th grade, I believe, playing on my quarter-size Engelhardt bass there at Highland Middle School in Libertyville, and even one year, because I was definitely on the smaller end as far as students were at that age, and remember at one point I actually was playing on we ran out of basses for some reason, and Art Price, the director, grabbed one of the cellos and cranked the pegs and said, "All right, now it's tuned to the bass notes." And he pulled the end pin out on the cello and actually was playing bass on the cello. So luckily that didn't happen too often. I think because of the piano background, I progressed fairly quickly without having to do much work on the bass, and so I think I was always a little bit in front of everyone else just because I had that background.
Sure.
Yeah, but it was nothing. I was never super serious about it, I would say, until high school, and I actually started getting serious more when I was getting really interested in jazz. Mm-hmm. So that was my first passion, I guess, with music was going in that direction.
Yeah. Well, and you had an interesting kind of cohort. And again, we know each other so well. So I have a sort of an interest, like I know, but you, so many people right around your year in high school ended up going into music. And it's interesting how that sort of happens. And even though I was teaching a bunch of you guys, I know that it wasn't me that like magically made something happen in Libertyville.
I'm going to say, that might be my theory, actually.
Yeah, well, that I would like to. My ego is growing, as you said. But no, but really, like, it was interesting. I probably because Doug Stewart and Peter Bowling went really far, and Scott Bakshis went to music school. There were a lot of people that were serious about it. I wonder what it was that about Libertyville or about that early age, because it's like a small community. That would be an anomaly if we could graph it out somehow, you know?
I mean, I think you need to mention all those people that you listed are all bassists. These aren't, other instrument. I mean, the program was always, it was a very solid program, and you started coming. There was one or two people that came before you, at least in the years I was there. But when you came was really when the bass section picked up, and we were for years the strongest section.
Right. It was hilarious. I remember there was a year where I think for the district for the Illinois All-State Orchestra program, the district, I think like 5 of the 10 were LHS bass players, and 4 of them went on to All-State or something ridiculously like that. So, and you were one of them, man. Well, but another thing that happened, I know that age for you, kind of in the middle of high school, you discovered the Chicago Youth Symphony, right?
Yeah, and that was a huge turning point for me. Honestly, I think that's what changed my direction. Before that, I was at least 50-50, probably more 75-25 jazz versus classical. And I was going to the Birch Creek camp in the summers for jazz, which was my first contact with the Eastman faculty, with Jeff Campell and Clay Jenkins and Rich Thompson from the Eastman Jazz faculty. Yeah, Chicago Youth Symphony. I was just blown away at the possibility of playing in an orchestra like that. And for the first time, I was not one of the best. I was challenged. I had people to look up to. I had people to learn from. And I got to go and hang out in Chicago on the weekends and really sort of gain some independence and do a lot of growing myself. And that was a big turning point for me. I owe a lot to that program. What a phenomenal program.
It's a great program, and it's really cool, especially for someone who doesn't live in Chicago, probably to like come into this great American metropolis, and you're playing in this 19th century building that's kind of an annoying building to get around, with the elevators. The folks listening, the building that the Chicago Youth Symphony rehearses in, they rehearse on the 8th floor of a building that has been around since I think 1880 at least, and they have pulley operated elevators. So there's a guy in there still. It's like we're back in the 19th century, and it's so quaint, but it's not a great setup when you're dealing with 100 people and instruments trying to get up to an 8th floor to rehearse.
It was sometimes a pain, but really a magical place, and it's the Fine Arts Building in Chicago down on Michigan Avenue, right by Grant Park, Millennium Park, and really a magical place because it's all, I think the whole place is rented out to music teachers, artists, dance studios, music shops and businesses. It's really really cool place.
When I love, you walk into the building and there's a old stone arch above and it says all passes, art alone endures. And I just remember that making such an impression on me when I came to Chicago. And then you go into this building, you hear pianos being played in studios and opera singers, and it's like a maze. They're like old kind of falling down paintings on the walls, and it really is like you feel like you're part of something, part of some artistic continuum when you go to that place.
Yeah. absolutely.
And so it's interesting because you had contact with Jeff Campbell and other folks from the Eastman faculty at Birch Creek, and then I just realized you were also working with Alan Tinkham, who's the conductor for Chicago Youth Symphony, another Eastman grad, right? So they must have had a big effect on your decision making for college.
Yeah, sure. So time and time again over those years before college applications, I kept running into people that had experience with Eastman and heard only good things and people recommending to check it out. So that was definitely one of my top choices, top prospects when I was applying.
Well, and so talk maybe a little bit about those years at Eastman and then maybe the decision to go overseas and study, because that had such a profound impact on what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, that actually started before, and that was thanks to Jeremy Marino at LHS at Libertyville High School. We had a tour through Europe where we hit Vienna, Salzburg, Prague, Budapest, and that was my first time in Europe, and just eye-opening culturally. That this whole other world over there, and suddenly so much of this music that that we played it and we learned it, we played it. So much of it just started to make sense. When you get to see, the palace that Haydn composed these works in and the environments that it was performed in and how it still is so alive and a bubbling scene today, it just made sense. And you felt closer to it. It was inspiring. And at that point, I promised myself I was going to get back somehow to study, to live, to work, whatever doors opened. But somehow it was going to happen. I was going to try to pick up some German in the meantime and see where the road took me.
When did you start learning German? Was that? And by the way, Eric's mother is, again, I know an awful lot about you just from our back history, but Eric's mother is a foreign languages teacher, and so I don't know, when did you start German? Did you start that in high school or?
No, I didn't. I didn't start till I got to Eastman.
Okay.
I started from scratch at Eastman in class with all singers, which, was an interesting way to learn because after 2 years of German, I could hardly speak a sentence fluently, but I could read or recite something perfectly, just like a singer would want to do, or translate or something. I could do that great. But it really wasn't until I got over here that the fluency picked up, and it's hard to replicate that experience of being forced to use the language. And that's really the best thing you can do, for sure. But so I started at Eastman. I did it sort of out of interest and potential preparation. Like I said, waiting to see what programs were available and how could I get over there.
Maybe talk about when you went overseas, like how, just the logistics of that, how you found yourself over in Europe.
Yeah, I had applied to a couple different programs, some music, some non-music. Some didn't work out for one reason or another. The first thing that did was Eastman had an exchange program with the University of Vienna, the University of Music and Performing Arts in Vienna. I believe me and this one other girl were the first Eastman students to utilize this program, and we went over for a semester. This was my senior year at Eastman. Yeah, so I initially had one semester there, and knew after that semester I had to get back somehow.
So you training in America, growing up in Chicago, playing, and then going to Eastman and studying, and then you get over to Vienna. And what were a couple of unexpected or surprising things just about studying music over there, or maybe just the culture in general?
In terms of studying music, Eastman School of Music is a great place to study music. Faculty is great, but I think one of the strongest aspects of it is their orchestral program, and we were just drilled in orchestra, and not just learning the excerpts or something, but we had for an 8-semester bachelor, you were required to do 8 semesters of orchestra, and each semester 4 concerts, I believe. So you were in orchestra nonstop. You were constantly preparing a program, very little space in between, and you were drilled in this repertoire. And I didn't realize at the time how much experience I was gaining from this. Sometimes it was kind of annoying. You wanted to be in the practice room working on your Bottesini or your Kusevitsky or whatever, but there is definitely value to that, because I came over when I came over here, I was shocked. There are a lot of strengths with a lot of the universities. Of course, every university here is different. I've only got experience with a few of them, but in general, especially, the beginning of a bachelor or a diploma over here, the orchestral aspect is not quite as focused on, in my experience. And I did some projects with the university orchestras, both in Vienna and Cologne, and the level of preparation and experience was really nothing compared to what I was used to over there. It's not to say, it has other strengths. It was just one.
Sure.
One difference. I felt very over prepared for the orchestra stuff there.
What was it like studying with Posch?
Yeah, Alois Posch was for many years principal bass of the Vienna Philharmonic. He recently retired, I think maybe 3-4 years ago. He's still teaching in Vienna, but it was a very different style of teaching than I was used to with James VandeMark and at Eastman, where I also had great experiences, and he was a great encouragement and helped me through a lot of playing issues that I had. It was a different environment when I got to Vienna. Mostly, it was more formal. First of all, a lot of the American-based studios are very, very friendly, very collegial, and it was definitely a more formal atmosphere over here, and that took some getting used to. There were some big differences in the style of teaching. Posch would come once per week. The studio was fairly small when I was there. Actually, in my time there, I was there for about 3 years. We were never more than 5 or 6 people in the studio at a given time. And but he would come and he would teach everyone in a row, back to back. And I don't want to use the word forced, but we were highly encouraged to sit in and listen to every lesson of all of our colleagues in the studio.
Wow, so it was like kind of like a giant masterclass day.
Yeah, it was a masterclass every week, and you were always a participant. So whether you liked it or not, you were performing for your classmates or colleagues every week, and that was a whole new aspect of, I guess at Eastman we also had masterclass. I think almost every week. But you wouldn't play in it every week. It would always be a couple students, and I thought this was crazy when I first got out to Vienna, and it was very intimidating because I was suddenly around some bass players, some of the best bass playing I had ever heard. I could not believe that some of these people were students, and most of them didn't remain students for long because I think the entire class from when I was there is now playing around the world. So yeah, that was definitely an adjustment to get used to this performance type of atmosphere every week. And so it felt like every week when you were practicing, for not for your lesson, but for your performance. And you wanted to impress your professor and equally as much your colleagues.
That's a really different kind of setup. It gives you the gestation period of a week or of 6 days between like the first performance and the next performance, I never really thought about that. Now, were there any just sort of differences you noticed in, technical training or like stylistic differences, the way that you were brought up, in Chicago and then Eastman versus the players that you were seeing, just bowing things, fingering things, vibrato, sound concepts, anything you can remember that was notable? Sure.
And I think an important difference over here is that the traditions are much more regional here. I get the impression, I'm pretty far removed from the American scene by now, but there are very compact regional traditions in Europe. You just have to look at the map. The countries are smaller. The languages spoken are very diverse, and just as much so the orchestral tradition. It still pervades today in all of these cities. Cities or regions have sometimes unique unique traditions, the Viennese oboe or the Wagner tuba, stuff that's really, played really in specific regions, and outside of that, not so much. With bass playing, the Viennese bow grip, there are some particular stances and techniques used in Vienna, a lot of them rooting back to, at least in recent history, the Streicher school.
Well, I'd love to know, in case folks aren't familiar with the Viennese bow grip, how does the Viennese bow grip differ from other types of German bow grips?
It's slightly different than the Czech grip, where your first finger and your thumb are sort of parallel to each other and work sort of together. The Viennese bow grip is a little, the thumb rests over the top of the bow, pointing away from the hand, and shouldn't be applying much pressure. It's just to help support the bow and is not really squeezing or applying pressure. Most pressure that goes into the string comes from the forefinger.
Yeah, and that's interesting that Vienna is one of those cities you think of, like you were mentioning, like the style of horn playing is totally different in Vienna, right? It's like the only play and so many instruments. So that must have been fascinating, not only to just get over to Europe, but to get over to such a place with such specific and long-standing traditions as Vienna.
And for me, when I came over, I also switched to German bow. I was playing French bow before that. So that was a big change. A couple months, after I got accepted to the program, I knew, I don't want to be the only loser out there with different type of bow, and I really wanted, the full experience. Yeah. So I went out and I bought a cheap carbon German bow, best thing I could afford at the time, and I tried messing around with it. Had a few people show me how it works, more or less, and then I got out there and they said, nope, all wrong. You got to do the Viennese grip. So I would say most of that semester was focused on just getting used to the German bow. But overall, it suited me much better. I didn't even really know it, but I had a lot of issues with French bow, just things that I had a real hard time getting to work. And I felt more comfortable with German bow. So for me personally, it was a good change, and I would never look back.
Yeah. Take us on the journey from studying in Vienna to ultimately getting a job in Europe, and just what that experience was like for you, the different programs and positions you went through.
Sure. So my time in Vienna, I survived gigging and teaching English. So that sort of kept me afloat during those years in Vienna. I started taking auditions for a lot of, there's just so many orchestras out here, and almost all of them have some sort of, they call it Praktikant program, internship program or academy program where you get lessons from the players, and it's basically a part-time contract for a year or something in one of the orchestras. And there's auditions for these every year, so I started taking auditions for those. I was sort of targeting Germany because my girlfriend was there at the time, my
sure.
now wife. So I was targeting getting up to Germany, and I ended up for a year in Lübeck with one of these internship contracts for a year. So I had a great year up there, and then after that, another year in Aachen. After that, was fortunate enough to land my job.
What are some, having gone through and taken several auditions, maybe just give us a few highlights in terms of differences in the American audition system, European audition system, even how many people show up? What's the list like? Is there a screen? What's that experience like?
Yeah, sure. So I can really only speak for the German audition standards. You said European, and it's different everywhere. I guess all the auditions I've done were either in Austria or Germany, and it's a pretty similar situation. First of all, solo tuning all the way, and that was also a difference at the universities too. Most of the students would just keep their bass in solo tuning all the time, and I think that sort of parallels this emphasis on the solo repertoire that is pretty prominent here. Having the bass always ready to go and ready for a solo performance instead of shedding the excerpts in the intended keys. So all auditions, including the excerpts, in solo tuning. That's the standard, at least for Germany. I think in some of the other countries, Scandinavia, I think is slowly getting rid of that. But here in Germany, it's standard still. So usually first round is behind a screen, not always. First round, usually classical concerto and maybe a couple of the excerpts already, and usually behind a curtain or a screen, and then the next round without, usually. So then usually the full audition is not done with a screen. Usually it's just a round or two. In terms of numbers of people, I've experienced all sorts of numbers, but I don't think it's anything like the numbers I hear in the States. But that may also be a result of the process of getting invited to the auditions is a little different. I'm not sure what the legal requirements are in the States, but I mean, I hear stories of these Chicago Symphony auditions lasting for 3 days or whatever. Just immense numbers of people that actually get invited and come and play and have to be heard. That usually doesn't happen here. I think usually the applicants are sort of handpicked, either by the bass section or by the representatives of the orchestra or some committee. I think they usually send out the invitations with the intention of making it a several-hour endeavor instead of a several-day endeavor. For some of the bigger jobs, you'll have a pre-audition the day before, maybe for people that are not known or students. So they'll come out a day early and see if they can get through the prelim audition the day before. But I've experienced everything from 2 people at an audition to 40.
Okay.
But rarely, I don't think ever more than that.
What's the year look like for you in general in terms of how many weeks a year do you play? How many concerts a week? How many basses in the orchestra? Just sort of the nuts and bolts of the job. Well,
and again, this is very different from orchestra to orchestra. I mean, there are so many different types of orchestras here. My orchestra, Philharmonie Südwestfalen, we would be like the equivalent in the U.S. of like a state orchestra. So we're not funded. We're not based in one city, and we serve a greater region. We have a rehearsal hall, sure, and we're kind of out in the countryside. It's actually pretty idyllic where it is, but we almost never play concerts there. We play in the region, sure, and in a lot of the bigger cities in the area, in Cologne and Dortmund and Düsseldorf, and it's so we travel around a bit within this corner of Germany. We also play some of the smaller towns in the area. And that is something that's definitely unique out here, and something that I wish people from the States could experience this and see this. Because if you could see the small town where we have our rehearsal hall in this area, these little villages, and you just could not believe that this community could support an orchestra like this, but they do, and they want to, and they're proud of it. And it's so deep in the blood and the tradition here, and we sell out concerts in these small towns as well as in the big cities, and the people love it. The people love it, and it doesn't really matter what you play, if you're doing a light New Year's concert or a heavier symphonic program, and the people come out. It's pretty amazing, and the politicians recognize this, and I can't say that the state of things is ideal right now. I mean, orchestras are getting cut and fused together in parts of Germany, and positions cut, downsizing. So it's happening here too, but I don't think it's anything like the rate of in the States or even in other parts of Europe. So it's still a pretty good place to be with good contracts and good conditions, and it's a good environment.
Well, and it's interesting to hear about the audiences. Because that's what it's all about, right? You're playing for the people, and to go and play for those full concert halls. And that says something about just the place of classical music in the culture of the communities.
It's a different, definitely a different scene out here. You don't have to explain it to the people. The people, they're curious and they want to understand it. They know it's important to their own history. And, of course, you need to do education and outreach and school programs and stuff to keep that curiosity alive. But mainly because of the government support and state financing here, there are a lot fewer problems to deal with, and you can really focus on creating a good product.
Well, and talk about, and now that you're a father, talk about some of the social, the amenities that you get, just the social programs and time out. Can you maybe just describe like how maternity, paternity leave, that sort of thing works? Because I know that's real different. Yeah.
Now, Germany has very good laws for maternity and paternity leave. I don't think are quite as progressive as even in Scandinavia. I think it's even more extreme or more progressive. Basically, the way it works here is you can both parents can take up to 14, a total of 14 months paid leave in any combination. So the way my wife and I did is she took 7 months off and I took 6. So we actually ended up not using all that was available, but just timing wise, that's how it worked out the best. I took 6 with 1 month overlapping, so we had a month off together. And this is paid leave, so it's not full pay. It ends up being about 2/3. But that's standardized for all of Germany, regardless of your occupation. So you're legally you have these legal protections to be able to do that. And I'm coming to the end of mine, and I will be going back to work next month. I'm really looking forward to going back to work, but I really, really love the time off to be able to be home with my son, and that's something. When I think of the alternatives, it's really a priceless time to have. And then the financial aspect just helps to make it possible.
So I got one more question for you, and it might be a different answer for you because it seems like you kind of had a pretty good plan early on. But if you could go back now, 20-year-old Eric, what advice would you give him?
All right. I think what really helped me, I was lucky enough. I kept all doors open, and I looked into these programs that maybe took me out of my comfort zone. And maybe I didn't do enough of it at the time, but that's definitely something I would recommend to younger people is you look beyond your comfortable horizons, because sometimes the grass is greener. Not always. But you won't know until you try it. And, a lot of, whether that's, trying a different summer camp or a different teacher but just keep the doors open and see what all is out there. Because in my case, I was led down a path that sort of made itself in front of me. Of a lot of hard work involved, of course, as well to make it all possible. But it's amazing what opportunities can open up if you really step out your front door and out of your comfort zone.
No, that's great. I think so many people think they don't even expand beyond their local horizons, and then maybe they expand out to their national horizons. But it's such a big world out here, and just like you've been describing this whole time. I mean, what a satisfying, from my perspective at least, lifestyle you've been able to create for yourself and employment. And yeah, I love that. That's a great sentiment.
Making a living playing music, there's nothing better than that, and very thankful.
Yeah. Eric, such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Folks, learn more about what Eric's up to at ericsteffens.de. And that's going to do it for another episode of Contrabass Conversations. Thank you for following along. This is so much fun to put these out into the world, to chat with these interesting people. It's such a fun way to spend my time, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking your time to listen to these. So much more in store for you. I don't even know where to begin. Follow along with everything we're doing at contrabassconversations.com, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.